What are the three biggest positions of need for the Arizona Cardinals in the 2023 NFL Draft? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Locked On Cardinals. Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen each and every day, free and available on platforms. Again, oh man, draft 48 hours away. Still so many things that could happen with the Arizona Cardinals. Do they trade back? Do they pick? Is Will Anderson gone? Do they take a corner? Do they jump in on the Paris Johnson Jr. train, just skyrocketing? Can you say skyrocket and train in the same sense? I don't know. Skyrocketing up draft boards. Like, it's the weirdest thing. So, like, before the draft even started, or before the, draft process really started, where all the mocks and everything, it was still free agency. It was like, can any player, any position group be traded up for not named quarterback? It's like, no. Nobody's going to trade up. The only person I even saw it was Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons when he and I were going back and forth a little bit on Twitter as it pertaining to the Cardinals trading back with Atlanta for them to trade up and draft a quarterback. He goes, trade up and draft a quarterback? No. Will Anderson? Maybe. Like we were saying kind of tongue in cheek. I don't think they're going to move up, 5 spots to draft Will Anderson, especially not now. But, it was kind of an afterthought. And it's just interesting now because now there's rumblings that teams may want to trade up to draft an offensive lineman. And are the offensive linemen good enough to warrant trading up, potentially giving up a future first, blah, 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 blah. It just adds more texture. It adds another layer to the 2023 NFL draft that we didn't necessarily think was possible when this whole process started. But it made me think, like, the three greatest positions of need for the Arizona Cardinals. And normally I go 3-2-1, least important to most important. I'm going to go most important first. And it really is just a reminder about one sentence that I say that has rung true since that fateful day when the first overall pick was taken in 2019. The most important position of need for the Arizona Cardinals is offensive line. Guard, center, tackle, doesn't matter. Sure, if you can draft a young player who could play center/guard, absolutely. Maybe he's not ready to play center right out the gate like Creed Humphrey was, but if you play guard, then it's something that at least is on the offensive line as you grow it for the future. Will Anderson isn't getting any younger. Kelvin Beachum isn't getting any younger. DJ Humphries isn't getting any younger. Whoever the hell is going to play left guard isn't getting any younger. Because the sentence is, and the adage is, if you've been listening to Locked On Cardinals for more than 10 minutes, if you don't protect Kyler Murray, none of this is going to work. And while Kyler Murray got injured outside the pocket, you could say, well, he's outside the pocket enough to where it doesn't matter. If you watch any of last year, regardless of who's quarterback, if you watch a second half of the 2021 season, if you watch any of 2020 or 2019, the Arizona Cardinals offensive line has just been good enough to get by. And Steve Keim, is one of his last gifts to this organization before unceremoniously being removed from post, was passing on Tyler Linderbaum out of Iowa, who would have been a perennial Pro Bowler from the center position, in trading for Hollywood Brown instead, because they had Rodney Hudson. 34, 35-year-old center who they had to beg to come back, who played 15 minutes in the 2022 season. They had their chance to eat their vegetables, and instead, Steve Keim decided to eat dessert instead. Isaiah Simmons, Zaven Collins, Hollywood Brown. Instead of Tristan Wirfs, corner, and then Tyler Linderbaum, they'd have their tackle and center for the future. Decided against it. So, still position of need number one. And don't look at the best player available. Don't look at this draft. The Cardinals' number one position of need is offensive line. I know there are many. I know that there are 1A, 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, 1F. Okay? But when it comes down to it, the most important position of need for the Arizona Cardinals is, and will continue to be offensive line. If Kyler Murray is not protected when he's in the pocket, none of this is going to work. Oh, well, he can't see over the offensive line anyways. And stop it. If you don't like Kyler Murray, that's fine. But understanding that the offensive line is the most important position group in football should be unwavered. And the Cardinals have had some severe negligence as pertaining to drafting talent on the offensive line. One thing Steve Keim did well was not overpay for an offensive lineman in free agency. He opted to offer a third-round pick for Rodney Hudson after his contract was voided by the Raiders, instead of having to outbid, the rest of people who wanted Rodney Hudson's services. They offered a third-round pick. Okay. That was one of the Steve Keim's better moves. Didn't overpay for Corey Linsley. Didn't overpay for Nate Solder. That was early on. I think he may have even got traded. I can't even remember. I think he signed with the Giants. Like, there were a lot of bad, and big offensive line contracts to offensive linemen, obviously, that Steve Keim did not take part in, which one of his better moves as general manager. But as pertaining to now going into the draft and going into, as long as Kyler Murray is the quarterback, or as long as the Cardinals have a quarterback on the roster who hikes the ball on game day, offensive line is going to be the number one position of need. Does that mean that the Cardinals should draft Paris Johnson Jr. at 3, or another one of the guards or offensive linemen that are towards the top of big boards, but not all the way at the top? This isn't a deep offensive line draft. I don't know. But with this podcast, the position of need that's greatest for the Arizona Cardinals continues to be, and will be offensive line, until that offensive line is ironclad, until that offensive line looks like the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line or something close to it. It's 49ers offensive line. It's going to be the number one position of need. The second biggest position of need for the Arizona Cardinals going into the 2023 NFL draft, it makes it tricky. It makes it tricky because this position of need is going to be more prevalent towards the top, but it's not going to be the most important position at the top. You know what we call that? Do you know what we call that in the biz? We call that a tease, baby. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day rolls on. Thank you to FanDuel. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by FanDuel. And with grand slams and no-hitters and double plays, they're all back, baby. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So don't miss the chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Now, I know it's splitting hairs here in some capacity. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals, as we're talking about the biggest position of need for the Cardinals because there are so many. But I think that there is still a clear hierarchy of importance as it pertains to this roster. Can I say as it pertains one more time? Let's find out. Locked On's NFL mock draft special is here, and it's bigger than ever. Follow along all 32 teams' first picks in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience. Only Locked On can deliver. All episodes are available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I went rogue in our mock draft, and it wasn't rogue like, oh, the Cardinals are giving up the 3rd overall pick. Not for anything. They just don't want to draft 3rd. No, not rogue like that. But I had the Cardinals, just a little spoiler alert, trading back into the 1st round after drafting at number 3 overall because I fielded for trade offers and I couldn't find any. So the Cardinals did draft at 3, but I had them trade back into the 3rd round or into the 1st round while giving up DeAndre Hopkins in the process. And you'll see my thoughts on it, and you'll see our draft experts' thoughts on it. Wasn't the most popular, but I figured that trading back into the 1st round and giving up DeAndre Hopkins to move up 7 or 8 spots is the most value the Cardinals would have gotten out of DeAndre Hopkins. And that's, so I did it. Check it out, Locked On NFL, and free and available wherever you get your podcast. The second most important position of need for the Cardinals after number 1, offensive line. Is this going to translate to the Cardinals drafting an offensive lineman at 3? No. But it's interesting to take stock of the position of need hierarchy because this hasn't changed in like 6 years. It's the same. Steve Keim just decided not to listen to me or Locked On Cardinals. See, if you ever want to come on the show, DM me on Twitter. I'm sure I'm your favorite person. The second biggest position of need for the Arizona Cardinals is cornerback. And just take the groans down, chill for a second, just go with me here because this rationale makes sense. What's the one thing the Cardinals have needed since 2018? 2019. A CB1. What's the one thing the Cardinals haven't had since 2019? A bona fide true CB1. Well, Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy was moved outside. Byron Murphy was on an island by himself because Patrick Peterson cheated and missed the first 6 weeks of the 2019 season, and that was all she wrote. Okay? Byron Murphy is not a true cornerback 1. He's shown flashes. He showed flashes in the first half of 2021. He showed flashes in the first half of 2022. But that was never supposed to be his role. He was always supposed to be a CB2 or CB1 light. And the Cardinals just never addressed the position, whether it be in free agency or otherwise. You can't even count Malcolm Butler. Because Malcolm Butler, rumblings were out that he went on designated to retire because he wasn't going to get the reps because he wasn't good anymore. And that was right near training camp too. It's just like you can't qualify that as a big move from the cornerback room. The Cardinals have not had a bona fide CB1 since prime Patrick Peterson, which was what, 2016, 2017, 6 seasons, 7 seasons. And even then, they didn't have a CB2. It was just him and Brandon Williams, a running back out of Texas A&M, I think, who had never played corner, started alongside Patrick Peterson in week 1 of 2017. That's the fun house, crazy Looney Tunes world that we've been living in with the Arizona Cardinals. So, if you asked me the position group that had the least amount of talent as currently constructed between the pass rush and the cornerback room, Marco Wilson's your CB1 right now. At least we saw flashes from Cam Thomas and Myjai Sanders last year. Sure, close second. But the cornerback room needs help and needs depth much more than the pass rush does. Now you could get into the thing, well, what position means more, pass rush or corner? It's corner. Cornerback is probably the toughest position to play in football, not named quarterback. And center, maybe. And the Cardinals have no talent. Marco Wilson showed flashes, fine. They have no leading talent in the cornerback room. So, just like 2017, the second biggest position of need the Arizona Cardinals have is cornerback. And really, unfortunately for the Cardinals this year, they're drafting 3. It's Tyree Wilson, it's Jalen Carter, and it's Will Anderson. And that's fine. The Cardinals need help in the interior defensive line and pass rush also from the edge rush position. But if you were to ask me the 2 biggest issues the Cardinals have had on their rosters in the last 6 years, offensive line, cornerback. Offensive line, cornerback. Offensive line, cornerback. 2023, lo and behold, offensive line, cornerback. Steve Keim was inept. So going into 2023, it's the same. Just because the talent is a different position at the top of the draft begs the question why the Cardinals don't try everything they can to trade down. Now, if you listen to yesterday's podcast, you'll hear me say the Cardinals can't just trade down to trade down. They can't just trade down to 7 without a plan. Christian Gonzalez should be there. Devin Witherspoon should be there at 7 if the Cardinals want to go corner, the 2 top corners in the draft. Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus, now he's a friend of the show, I think now. He thinks Christian Gonzalez should be the pick probably at 3 for the Cardinals. He has an absolute affinity for the young man out of the Pacific Northwest. Somewhere, someplace, a region of the United States that the Cardinals have fared pretty well when it comes to drafting DBs. Budda Baker, Jalen Thompson, Byron Murphy in a tertiary role. So, corner, still second biggest position of need for the Cardinals. You know why? Because it is, it was, and it continues to be until something changes. And the third biggest position of need for the Arizona Cardinals, this is the obvious one. People may have put this at 1 just because the Cardinals are tied to edge rushers with the number 3 overall pick. Look at the grand scheme of the roster. That's what you get from Locked On Cardinals to actually think. I make you use what's in between your ears and not just spew what other people say. Let's have a discussion about why edge rusher is the third biggest position of need and not first for the Cardinals as we're 48 hours away from the draft. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. We roll on. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by BetterHelp. Okay? Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Okay? Therapy is about deepening your self-awareness and understanding because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way that we do until we talk through things. And BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. I feel like I need to explain myself and disclaim even more on this podcast, like something designed like this, because this looks a lot like, I'm bored. Let's come up with something new to talk about that I don't actually believe. I 100% believe what I'm saying. Offensive line, number 1 biggest position of need. Cornerback, number 2 biggest position of need. And edge rush, number 3 biggest position of need. And you could talk me into the interior defensive line position, nose tackle, somebody like that as being the third position of need. But I think it's such a premium position where you can get a young talent on a very inexpensive contract as correlating to what they get after their rookie scale deal that tips over the edge rusher to the third most important position of need or biggest position of need for the Cardinals. And with Will Anderson, with Tyree Wilson at number 3, it begs the question, well, why isn't that number 1? Why would the Cardinals take, the best player available and not their biggest position of need? Because they have so many positions of need. That's the easy answer there. I've said, and I'll continue to say, I said this yesterday, I said it all over Twitter. The Cardinals draft any position that's not a quarterback, kicker, punter, and a little, Twitter honorable mention, long snapper, it's a win. Now, that's not to say they're going to drop Bijan Robinson or Jackson Smith and Jigba at 3 overall. Let's not be silly here. But say the Cardinals were to trade back, say Tennessee got a bug up their rear end and they wanted to trade up to 3 and draft Anthony Richardson, or CJ Stroud dropped to 3 and that was who they wanted, even though there was some weird optics coming out of the CJ Stroud camp, not out of the camp, but towards CJ Stroud with his, football intelligence due to, one metric. And Tennessee's like, that's our quarterback. I don't care. Go get him. And the Cardinals move back to 11. If you told me they drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba with the 11th overall pick, okay, I could see that. DeAndre Hopkins isn't going to be a part of the team anymore. They need players everywhere. Would it be the best and behoove them in an effort to position them the best for the future? No. But if they drafted a wide receiver at 11, be like, okay, I get it. I mean, they need wide receivers. But after offensive line at 1 and cornerback at 2, edge rusher at 3 is just the obvious choice. You save money at a premium position by drafting a guy there. And Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson seem to be guys that with wildly different skill sets, it seems. And Tyree Wilson seemingly measurably, like with the measurables, may be the better prospect as we start to get closer and closer to the draft. A lot of smart people are saying that. And, I listen to when smarter people than me talk. It's the third biggest position in need. And I think the thing to take away from today's podcast on Locked On Cardinals is if you can't protect Kyler Murray, none of this is going to work. Your opinion of Kyler Murray aside, if you can't protect quarterback, nothing's going to work. Number 1, that's why offensive line is the most important. Number 2, cornerback. It is the premium position on the defensive side of the ball, even more than edge rusher. And if you can find a CB1 in the draft in the top 10, you win. You win. And then number 3, edge rush, because the Cardinals need pass rush help too. They need so many things. But I think in that order, manicured to the Arizona Cardinals, I think that's exactly the ranking for most important positions needed for the Arizona Cardinals to bolster that roster, to introduce Arizona Cardinals 2.0 as we hope to witness some more winning, more stability, and a better culture than we've experienced, at least for the last decade. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. I'll talk to you tomorrow.